What up guys, Cole here, and have you ever wondered why two different sales reps can say the same exact words on a sales call? Same exact script, same exact pitch, same everything, they get two entirely different results. And I mean, one might close 30 to 40% while the other one closes just 10. Well, I want to answer that question for you in this video. And this is something I can tell you that I struggle with personally like crazy. When I first started in sales, I literally was the worst guy on the team. And what was even more frustrating than that though, was that I was saying the same words, using the same script, handling objections the same way as the other experienced guys on the team, but they were closing 30 to 40% while I was closing maybe just like 10, and was almost so bad to where I was about to get kicked off the team. Well, until I figured out this one thing, I stayed that way. And once I figured this out, I actually went from the worst guy to the best performer on the entire team. Now, the one thing I'm talking about is sub-communication. And what I'm gonna do for the rest of this video is splice over to a different training from one of our high-end masterminds. It's called Advanced Sub-Communication and Tonality. And this explains why two different sales reps can literally say the same thing, same words, same script, same everything, and get entirely different results. And once you master this and actually understand the principles of what I'm gonna teach you in this training, you're gonna be able to increase your closing rate by 5% if you're already really good, or even 10, 20% or more if you're just starting off and you're really trying to master this. So I'm gonna splice over to the training now. Enjoy, and we'll see you next time. What we're gonna dive into in this training is the 3 mechanisms of social conditioning. We're gonna talk about idea receptiveness. We're gonna talk about 3 certainty distinctions, 3 tells of dominance in influential vocal tonality, 3 levels of rapport in tonality. If you can't tell, I was high on the number 3 today. So we're going through a lot of 3s. And then we're also going to talk about personal examples and client examples of good and bad tonality from videos of me, as well as call review breakdowns that I've done with clients. So this is probably the best part for you to really get that distinction. So make sure you stay all the way to the end and watch this video. So first, 3 mechanisms of social conditioning and idea receptiveness. So really quickly, just as a primer, or just to set some context, there's really too much information in the world. There's an abundance of information and way too much for your mind to process, or specifically your RAS to process all at one time. So because of this, the mind creates 3 primary filters in which it can quickly and easily decide with the least amount of energy as possible, because your mind wants to conserve energy, which ideas it accepts to be true. Okay, so I'll repeat that. There's basically 3 filters our brain just automatically has subconsciously that allow us, or kind of help us decide which ideas we should accept to be true while conserving as much energy as possible. If you want to go into this, this is really what the book Influence by Robert Cialdini is all about. So the 3 filters are the certainty of the person communicating the ideas, the inner alignment of the person communicating the ideas, and the other people's thoughts and ideas around the idea itself, or in other words, social proof. Okay, so if your communication has these 3 things behind it, the more likely somebody else, i.e. your prospect, is going to accept that to be true. Okay, so we're going to dive into each of these, but let me be really clear here. If we can nail all of these in our sub-communication, in our tonality, and in our body language, the more likely somebody else, whether that's a prospect or anybody you're trying to influence, is going to accept what you're saying to be true. Okay, so we really want to not only understand these and know what they are, but know actually how to influence these and use these to our advantage if we're in sales. Okay, so first, let's talk about the certainty of the person communicating the ideas. Okay, so this is why it's not important what you say, but more important how you say it. Okay, and we're going to dive into 3 distinctions so you could understand certainty when it comes to tonality. So by the end of this, you should really, really get what I'm saying here. The first one we're going to talk about is what's called the sound of belief. Okay, so just as an example, I want you to think about 2 politicians who are like yelling and screaming at each other. They're calling each other idiots, and they're giving off this vibe to the opposing candidate that, like, because you don't believe what I believe in, you're basically stupid. Okay, almost as if it's like so painfully obvious that the idea being discussed should be accepted as true, to where if you don't accept it, something is wrong with you. Okay, it's like if you don't believe what I believe, something is like your brain just doesn't even work. Okay, now that is the sound of belief. Now, let me be very clear. I'm not condoning you're going to scream or yell at your prospects, or, do anything that you're seeing on the debates nowadays. I'm not condoning you're going to call them stupid. I don't want you to make them feel dumb. That's not what I'm saying here. I'm using an extreme example for you to understand what the sound of belief actually is. And then inside of you, you need to have this ironclad conviction that every bone in your body knows what you're saying is true. Okay? So a lot of times, like I've worked with sales floors, and don't take this the wrong way, but just, a salesperson will have a call that kind of frustrates them, and they'll almost get off the call and they're like, dude, that person just didn't get it. Like, they just don't get it. They're a freaking idiot, And they don't mean like the person's an idiot, like as a person, right? They're just kind of frustrated, and that's something they're saying as an aside. But that's actually reflective of their sound of belief, because what they're saying and what they were proposing to the prospect, the way of thinking they were trying to transfer to the prospect, they're so certain that that is the way they need to be thinking, that almost like anybody who doesn't think that way, it's like they just don't get it. Like they're almost just an idiot. Okay, so again, let me be very clear. Do not call your prospects idiots on the phone, but you need to have that calm inner sense of certainty that every bone in your body knows inside of you that what you're saying is true. Okay, that's a sound of belief. All right, so pumped up certainty versus resolve. Okay, so I first heard this from Eli Wild, and this is kind of what I've took from this, and it's added a lot of value into my career. But pumped up certainty is like, think about this hypey salesperson, or a bunch of people jumping up and down at Tony Robbins, UPW, and they're like all pumped, and they're like absolutely certain, right? But if you're around somebody like this, it's kind of off-putting. Like, it's kind of weird, to be honest. And it's definitely better than being in like a derp state. It's better than being, apathetic Eeyore, right? But it's certainly not the most influential state you can be in. And if you think about the people who are the most influential people in the world, they're not in this state of absolute certainty, That's not what they're doing. More so, they're in a state of resolve. Okay? So resolve is the certainty as if it may as well already be done. Okay, so this is a really good example, I think. If you played sports in high school and college, I know I did, this will hit home with you 100%. So think about two different types of games. Think about a game that you were leading up to with a team that you knew was like a little bit better than you. It's a must-win game. And to even have a chance, you gotta perform at your best, okay? So like the day leading up to this game, okay, let's say the game's in the evening, you got a day of school. Day leading up to this game, you're more likely to be tense, you're more likely to be nervous, you're kind of like pumped up, you're like, chest bumping people in the hallways or whatever, that's what we did. And you're almost like jumping up and down, like there's this energy of like tenseness and like nervousness, and a little bit of excitement too. And you're absolutely certain, okay? And that's not necessarily bad. Okay, that's better than being, like I said, an apathetic Eeyore and like not being pumped at all. But the second version, and this will really make sense to you, is a game where like you're so much better than a team, you may as well already have won, right? Like this is not going to be a competition. You're probably going to beat them by 40, even if you don't try. Okay, so you're not necessarily unfocused throughout the day, but you're loose, you're relaxed, you're at ease, or even maybe laughing a little bit and having a little bit of fun. Okay, and this is really what's going to prime you to get into kind of a flow state. And if you think about like the New England Patriots during the Brady-Belichick era, they weren't like, it depends on when you're watching this video, but, they weren't like the flashiest team out there. They weren't the Seattle Seahawks. They're not the Dallas Cowboys. They're not, a lot of these teams that were just super flashy and in the media and all that stuff. They're just down the business. Okay, they're calm, certain. They mean business. They run the process. If you think about Alabama and how Nick Saban runs his team, kind of the same way. Like they're so confident in the groundwork that they lay before they even step onto the playing field that it might as well already be done. So that is resolve. Okay. First scenario is like that pumped up certainty. Second one is resolve. And again, this is a place that allows you to be fully relaxed, carefree, slightly humorous. It's really the primer for a flow state. And it's because inside of you, it's like it may as well already be done. There's no contest here. There's no ifs, ands, and buts. There's no I'm trying my best or I really want to. It's like, no, it's done. Okay? So that's resolve. And it's another distinction of certainty that you really want to bring on these calls. That's why like hypey, high-pitched salespeople, that's just you're never going to be an A player like that with that type of energy. You need that degree of resolve. The next thing is shallow versus depth in your expression. Okay? So when somebody talks, there's a certain weight that you can sense from it, okay? So is what they're saying coming from thousands of hours of experience in the trenches and truly being the best in the world at the topic at hand? Or is what they're saying just very shallow? Like, can you sense that there's not really a depth of experience behind the words that they're saying? So there should feel like a heaviness in the communication. Like every word this guy is saying comes from 10,000 hours of experience. Okay, whether that's true or not. So think about some examples here. Everybody out there nowadays, especially with social media, they're just spewing, personal development stuff all day, every day. Okay, so imagine watching a video of just some Joe Schmo spewing some personal development stuff about getting in state, getting leverage on yourself, and then imagine Tony Robbins saying that same exact content. Who do you think is going to have more depth in their expression, right? Like there's an obvious weight, like feeling of like heaviness and depth around what Tony says. Okay, another example, totally unpersonal development related, is imagine the mechanic inspects your car, and after he's under the hood, he closes the hood, he walks over to you, he explains to you exactly what's wrong, what the problems are, why those problems are a problem, what's going to happen if nothing changes, and he explains to you like in a detail where he just knows this problem like the back of his hand. Like you can tell he's seen this problem, he's fixed this problem 1,000 freaking times, okay? And usually when that happens, you just kind of accept what he's saying to be true. And that's because you can tell it's coming from that depth of experience, okay? So how do you apply this to you? Well, if you're an entrepreneur, you likely already have it because either what you're selling, you created, like you actually created the service, and you really believe in it because of that, or you've actually done it. Like you're teaching people how to grow grow an agency to 6 figures a month, and you've actually grown your agency to 6 figures a month. So, with an entrepreneur, this is not something that a lot of times they need to work on. A lot of times, or maybe it is, but as a salesperson, it certainly is, okay? And for salespeople out there, what I really want you to think about is becoming an expert in your prospects' problems. You don't have to be an expert in the industry. You don't have to be like some influential thought leader. You just need to be a fucking expert in that problem. Like that problem is your bitch, okay? Think about it this way. There's likely 1 to 3 problems that your market consistently has when you get on the phone with them. If you know those problems inside and out, you know exactly how to identify, diagnose, and solve them, and you just give off this vibe like, dude, I see these problems all the time. I fix these problems for breakfast. Like I'm not even like does not even faze me. Okay, this is normal. We fix these problems all day, every day. Now we're out of sales frame and we're into expert frame. Okay, and believe me, everything you say is going to be so much more likely accepted to be true when you're out of sales frame and they're looking at you as the expert, the trusted advisor, the authority, etc. All right, so the second mechanism of social conditioning is the inner alignment of the person communicating the ideas. Okay, in short, think about it this way. Are you walking the walk or are you talking the talk? Okay, this is a large part of why most entrepreneurs can always sell better than a trained salesperson, okay? And it's because they are in total alignment, likely, with the ideas that they're presenting because they've actually done it, okay? So this is something that I've learned firsthand, and I feel like I have a really I'm one of the few people out there, I'm sure other sales trainers can attest to this as not well, but it's like I've really been able to experience this because most people, they've either only been a sales rep or they've either only sold as an entrepreneur. I've done both, okay? And I will tell you, even though I was closing 40 to 60% as a sales rep and I was doing really, really well, I was producing results that most people have not produced in the industry. At the same time, I'll tell you this, like when I went to go sell my own offer, it was just the numbers I was hitting in terms of close rate, 70, 80, 90% sometimes. There's just no way I would have ever hit that if I was a full-time sales rep. It's just impossible, okay? And that's because at that point, what I was selling was something I'd actually done, okay? And I was the expert at, I was in total alignment with everything that I was speaking about and the ideas that I was communicated. So if you're not just talking about it, but you're living it and it's ingrained into your being, you're going to be 1,000% more influential. For me, it's like if I'm selling somebody on sales training, like this is my life's work. So you better believe I'm in total inner alignment of every single idea I'm going to be communicating over the phone, okay? That's why a huge aspect of sales is growing as a person, raising your standards, up-leveling your identity, because at the end of the day, nothing is more influential than who you are in the way you think. And really who you are is a product of the way you think. Okay, so this is why a lot of times after you get the fundamentals down, some of the best sales training you can have is managing your energy, learning this exact video that I'm telling you right now, learning this stuff, and just really developing yourself as a person, raising your standards, improving your ways of thinking, and learning how to think like a successful person. So if you're thinking of the person who the prospect wants to become, all you have to do is transfer to them the successful way of thinking, okay? This is a little bit wordy here, but let me explain. If, for instance, let's say I'm teaching somebody how to grow their business to $100,000 a month. Right now, our business is on pace for about $500,000 a month this month, and I have over 50 clients who are at 7 figures, multiple 7 figures, or even 8 figures plus in revenue. So I have the level of thinking because I've done it and helped others do it of how to get to $100,000 a month. I have that level of thinking, the thinking that needs to be successful to achieve that outcome. It's going to be very, very easy for me to transfer that level of thinking over to the prospect. Now, that doesn't mean if you're a salesperson, you have to grow in a $100,000 a month business to be able to sell a program that teaches somebody how to get to $100,000 a month. What it does mean is that you need to have a successful way of thinking, and you need to know how people who are at that level or above that level think and how they make decisions, and you need to transfer that thinking to the prospect. It doesn't mean you have to have the results, but you have to have the level of thinking, okay? Part of the reason I was able to grow my business from 0 to 500 grand a month in less than a year was because through all of my sales career, I had up-leveled my thinking so much, and I had seen so many people go through different programs that I've sold, the people that were successful, the not successful, the patterns that made them successful versus not successful, and I knew the level of thinking. And really when I got on the call, it was about diagnosing the problem, fixing the problem, and then helping the prospect and selling them on a way to think. Okay. And then because of that and all the personal growth that I had as a full-time salesperson, my business was able to explode because I had such a head start and I was able to develop my thinking and my mindset so much before I even got started. So hopefully that makes sense. It's a little bit esoteric, but more than happy to help anybody with that if they're struggling to understand it. So few practical tips on improving this. The first one, as you may have heard, is the mirror. So are you the prospect who you want to attract? Right? You need to be the prospect. How do you say this? You want to be the prospect that you want to attract. Okay? Do you make quick decisions? Do you invest in yourself? Or do you make a bunch of bullshit excuses because your objections will be their objections? Okay? So you need to show up as the person who you want to attract on the phones. The other thing is your standards. Okay? In short, are you keeping your promises and commitments to yourself? Are you doing the things you're saying you're going to do? You cannot influence somebody to live up to their highest standards if you aren't living up to yours. This is why when a sales rep is in a rut, one of the first things I do is ask how the routines are doing. Are they waking up on time? Are they following the things they said they were going to do? Are all their habits in line? Like, are the behaviors, the easy stuff that they can control, are those things being executed flawlessly? Most times, the answer is no, okay? So if I can get them to reset their standards and start winning with the things that they can control, they build back momentum, they start feeling better about themselves, they start trusting themselves more, and the next thing you know, the certainty in which they communicate over the phone is so much better, okay? The next thing is improving your world view. Okay? So some of the best sales training can actually be personal development. We kind of talked about this. And the reason for that is that your inputs dictate your outputs. So you can only put out into the world that in which some time you have taken in the form of information. Okay? That doesn't mean you can only do, say, or create that which you read in a book or a training program, guys. But there's your world and your depth of experience. There's how you were brought up from your parents, that there's mentors that you had, failures that you've had, the lessons that you learned, on top of books, courses, anything that has helped you develop as a person, the information in the world that you've taken in. All of that
will dictate what you're able to put out, okay? I'm not totally familiar with this, but I do know if you look at all of the philosophers, I think like Galileo and Newton and all of these guys, in some way, shape, or form are sort of interconnected, and that some of the most people who had the most influential ideas in the world that still are very talked about today, they were influenced heavily by people who also had ideas like that and who also's ideas were talked about today. So there's a very, very connected web of those people. If you look at Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, most of the top Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu trainers in the world, they're all connected and they usually relate back to like 2 or 3 main schools. Okay? And that's because their inputs dictate their outputs. They learn from the best and therefore they became the best. So some great reading for this is 177 Mental Toughness Secrets of the World Class. Amazing book. Straight Line Leadership and Leaderships by John Maxwell. Really anything by John Maxwell will be good to go through. But I'll tell you what, guys, like if you read these, you'll sell better just by the sake of reading this every morning. You'll start to sell better. It's just not even a up for debate here. So last thing is your overall vibe. Okay, I've kind of said this, but one of the things I always, if I coach somebody who's struggling on tonality, one of the things that I really try to hammer into them is that you should have this vibe that you've done this 1,000 fucking times. This problem is your bitch, and you know exactly what the fuck you're talking about. Okay, and I'm even cursing here, just really like drive that point home of how certain you need to be. Like it's not this hyped up, pumped up certainty like we talked about earlier, but it's like, you know, like you're the mechanic. Like you have seen this 1,000 times. You fixed it 1,000 times. You know exactly the way of thinking that's needed to fix this problem. You know exactly what needs to be done to fix this problem. Okay, that vibe needs to come off on your calls. And if you can listen to my calls, my sales calls, you can tell there's a weight and there's a heaviness behind what I say. Okay, and it should be the same for you. All right, so let's move on to number 3, other thoughts and beliefs around the idea, i.e. social proof, okay? Social proof is one of the critical and the main shortcuts our brain uses to make decisions, okay? So we already talked about the 3 mechanisms of social conditioning and the 3 filters of idea receptiveness. They're really the same things. But this is why I recommend using what's called status drops in a cool way, in a non-douchey way. So status drops can be anything from sharing case studies or even more powerfully, kind of name dropping maybe some big people that you've worked with, some big brands that you've been a part of, big things you've been a part of, publications that you've been in, things that you've done have been notable, whatever, your own track record. The key though, and I'm probably going to answer one of your objections as I say this, is you can't be a douche, okay? Like if you don't do this in a tactful, cool way that's almost a little bit covert, that it's just going to trigger a ton of sales resistance and it's just not going to be cool, okay? But before we get into actually how to do that, the more social proof we have, the larger our status delta is going to become. Now, the status delta is the perceived difference or the difference in perceived status from 2 different people, okay? Easiest example is if you're walking down the sidewalk and a police officer just walks up to you and flashes his badge and says, "Get off the sidewalk now." Most times, I don't care if you're The Rock, you know, I don't care how big and intimidating you are, how badass you think you are, your ass is just going to get off the sidewalk. Even the president of the United States, he'd probably just get the fuck off the sidewalk, you know, because there's innate trust in what the police officer is saying. And when he flashes his badge, there's a status delta present, and the person who has the higher status has more influence, okay? A friend was telling me, this is a little bit of a different example, but a friend was telling me he was at a restaurant in LA, and Leonardo DiCaprio was there. And when he walked in, slowly, you know, he had his hat down, he was trying not to be noticed and all these things, but a few girls noticed him, were going up to him, and then eventually it kind of got around to the restaurant that, you know, everybody sort of realized that he was at the restaurant eating by himself. It was his favorite restaurant. And you could almost feel like an air of almost like a little bit of tension come over the restaurant, okay? And, you know, a little bit of, not necessarily, I don't know if unrest is the right word, but, you know, definitely an air of tension and like, people are like, oh, fuck, you know, Leonardo DiCaprio's here. It's pretty cool. And, you know, he's famous, whatever, you love his movies. And that's because of the status delta of somebody who's extremely famous, okay? Now, it's like anything that he says more influential, like should it be more influential because he's famous? Not necessarily, unless it's about acting, but this is just how the world works, you know, because there's such a higher perceived status delta that it has so much more of an influence on us. Okay, so hopefully that example makes sense. It's a little bit different. The police officer example, I feel like, is relatively straightforward. You should just get that. Okay, so now on a sales call, how do we actually do this in a cool way? Okay, so the best way, I'm just going to make this really short. The best way to do it is to only do like a quote unquote status drop when you're proving a point that you're making to be true. So let's talk about, maybe your program has like 3 or 4 key deliverables. Maybe you're talking about one of the deliverables, okay? And you explain the deliverable, how it works, the benefits of the client, ultimately what it means to them, how it relates to the thing that they told you earlier on the call. And then you say, hey, does that make sense? And they're like, yeah. And it's like, and just for instance, just to kind of drive this point home, and then you go into kind of a case study or a story or something that you've done in the past, or even your own results as a business. Does that make sense? So you're using that case study or that status drop to prove the point you were making to be true. Okay? Because really everything you say in your pitch is a claim to an extent. Okay? So you want a status drop to prove your claims to be true. It's like an example to drive the point home. And when you do it that way, it becomes very like consultative and just natural. And it's almost just as if you're just telling them that to help them understand what you said better. So it's just kind of very much framed in their own best interest, if that makes sense. So I have a whole 30-minute training on this. I just linked it right here. It's actually a free training that you can check out. So we're going to talk about vocal tonality and the 3 tells of dominance. Okay, now for our purposes, think of dominance as the same thing as certainty. That's probably not true on a pure definition standpoint, but just to simplify here, think of it as the same thing for now. So we're going to talk about the 3 tells. The first one is full range of expression. So you've probably heard in body language to have a large posture, take up a lot of space, shoulders back, head up, and to have this large open posture. Okay, to where you're not crossing your arms, you're not crossing your legs, you're large open and you're taking up space, okay? Think of full range of expression as the equivalent of that, but with tonality, okay? Because one of the ways we show dominance is through taking up space, not only through our body language, but through our voice and our expression, okay? And the reason for that is back in the tribal, prehistoric times, one of the ways alpha males showed their dominance was doing exactly that, through both their body language, but also through their vocal tonality as well. Now, keep in mind, most people in tribal communities weren't alpha males. So the majority of people who evolved and passed on their genes in prehistoric times were people who learned to stifle their expression as a survival mechanism, not to attract the attention of other alpha males in the tribe. Because if you did that, you risked what was the greatest fear back then, which was exile and basically the equivalent of death. Okay, so now I'm not a evolutionary psychologist by any means here. So this is the way I understand this, but I do know this is critically important, and regardless, it's irrelevant because what we want to learn is how to unstifle our expression, so we're not putting a cap on our range of expression. We need to broaden that. Okay, and we're going to talk about how to do that in this example to come here. Now, the next thing is carefree, free flow expression versus contained expression. So just to ask you a question, have you ever been around somebody and you cared what they thought of you a lot? Okay, maybe somebody who you perceived was higher status, you looked up to them, they kind of made you a little bit nervous and you cared what they thought of you. Okay, did you second guess yourself when you're around that person? Did you get in your head a little bit? Maybe you were a little bit quieter, maybe you were a little bit more timid than usual. I know probably everybody watching this video has felt that way about somebody in their lives. Okay, so you have to be free about what others think about you. And you really have to be the uncontained, freely flowing, expressed version of you, okay? So this is very similar to the state of resolve in which we were talking about earlier. You have to be relaxed, grounded, and not second guessing and judging your expression, okay? So when you're communicating with somebody, the inner dialogue that is criticizing and judging your communication has to be gone. That's why meditation is so important. Okay, but when you're truly present in the moment and you're just letting everything flow through you, okay, you're having that carefree, free flow type of expression, not a contained expression, okay? And a lot of times when you're in this state, which is very like kind of a flow state almost, you're at ease and like resolved, you even have that lighter sense of humor. So as an example, Think about a time where you truly did not give a fuck if you made the sale or not. Like, you literally did not care. You closed 3 people already today. This is your last call of the day. You're like, dude, if you want it, great, because you should do it. But if you don't, you basically don't get it, and it's your loss. And then they buy anyways. Okay, I'm not saying you would explicitly say that, but that's kind of almost the energy that you're coming off on. And that's what we're talking about here. Because at that point, you just don't care. And because of that, you're just not judging your communication. It's just completely free-flowing through you. All right, this is why a lot of sales reps, once they get fully ramped and they start to have 3, 4, 5 calls a day every single day, they start to do a lot better because they sort of embody this because they don't need any one sale. The last thing, the last tell, is shifts in cadence. So you don't want to have a monotone pacing. What actually holds attention is pauses and shifts in the cadence, and even shifts in cadence and emphasize certain words. So especially this one I'm going to demonstrate in this example below, but you're also going to get a good kind of distinction of number 1 as well. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go through this twice, and one's going to be really, really bad. Hopefully I don't laugh trying to do it because it's going to be so bad. And then the second one's just going to be how I normally would do it, just always. Okay, so let's do it. The first one, and this is bad monotone pacing and very contained, not full range of expression. Yeah, so hey, what I really found to work best on these calls is first diving in to understand your business, the mechanics of it, how it works, and ultimately what you feel like are the constraints that are keeping you from being where you want to be. And once we can identify those, I can give you some thoughts, and if it makes sense, go into what we do and what we have going on over here and how that might work for you. And if that's something you want to talk about. But regardless, I can give you my thoughts on, what's happening with your business, and even point you in a better direction if that would be the best thing for you too. Sound good? So you see how, and obviously, guys, that was a really bad example, but you see how I tried to limit my range of expression very, very narrowly. Okay, there's not a full range of expression, and I tried to make my cadence. Like, a pure monotone cadence is really the cadence that sounds like you're reading from a script. Okay, so compare that to how I just would normally say it always. Hey, so look, what I've really found to work best on these calls is first just diving in to understand your business. Okay, so the mechanics of it, how it works, and ultimately what you feel like are the constraints that are keeping you from being where you want to be. Now, once we identify those, I can give you some of my thoughts, and if it makes sense, we can definitely go into what we have going on over here and how that might work out for you if that's something you want to talk about. But regardless, I can give you my thoughts and even point you in a better direction if that'd be the best thing for you as well. So, sound good? So you see how there are certain times where, I said I paused on constraints, and then certain parts I sped through, okay? And there's just a lot of sometimes my tonality goes down, and sometimes it goes up, and sometimes it speeds up, and all of that stuff, okay? So really, the best way to embody this, and if you feel like you're ever reading from a script, and you sound like you're reading from a script, you need to read this so many times where it becomes burned into your brain. It's inside of your being to where you can just basically kind of just look at this section of the call in your script and just boom, just reel it off. And then that way, it's coming off authentically every single time. Now, the last thing we're going to talk about is the 3 levels of rapport and 3 different tonalities, okay? So there's seeking rapport, neutral rapport, and breaking rapport. Now, easiest way to think about it, guys, upward inflecting tonality. So upward inflecting tonality, equal inflecting tonality, and downward inflecting tonality, right? So those are the 3 sort of tonalities that we can have at any one time when we're speaking, period, whether that's on a sales call or whatever. Now, what we really want to avoid is overuse of upward inflecting. Now, there's a normal person communicating freely with free flow of expression is going to use a combination of these, okay? There is going to be time where you're going to be confused and you're asking a question to become more certain about something that you don't know about. That's totally fine, okay? But on a sales call, we don't want to have the biggest issue I see a lot of times when it comes to tonality, and you'll see this in the examples that we're going to go through in a little bit, is upward. It's upward inflecting tonality. That's the root of that is because they're uncertain in their own sales process, and they don't know, they have this feeling that they don't know what they're doing. Okay, so we talked about the vibe earlier, that I've done this 1,000 times. I know exactly what the fuck I'm doing. I see this problem day in, day out. I know exactly how to fix it. And you have that frame as like a leader and an expert. It's really what you want to avoid is the opposite of that, to where like you almost just feel in that call like you don't know what you're doing. And a lot of times the symptom of that will be a lot of upward inflecting tonality. So let me go through this example again and do it with a little bit of upward inflecting tonality. Hey, so what I've really found to work best in these calls is first diving in to understand your business. So the mechanics of it, how it works, and ultimately like what you feel like are the constraints that are keeping you from being where you want to be. Now, once we identify those, I can give you my thoughts if it makes sense, see what, I can't even finish it because it's like so painful to say. But I think you get the point. Right? And once we go through some of these examples, you're going to see some salespeople who normally don't talk like this at all. Like they're not, walking around in their day-to-day lives with upward inflecting tonality, just totally overusing it. But then on the sales call, it's just constant. And it's because it's a symptom, and the root cause is a deeper sense of uncertainty and lack of comfort with their sales process. So what we really want to do is kind of remain more on the equal inflecting and downward inflecting. Now, if you listen to the example I gave earlier, that'll be a good example of this. And then we're also going to dive into these two personal examples from me. So probably about, I made this training for one of our internal salespeople about a month ago. And it totally bumped him. He wasn't necessarily out of pocket or in a rut, but it took him from like, doing decent to just closing almost everybody he spoke with almost overnight, okay? And I just showed him the example of these two videos. And one is when I first started making paid marketing content, and this is just really embarrassing. And then the second one was like from about a month ago when, I put out a lot of content. I just don't care what people think anymore. I'm just like, whatever, okay? So what's funny is like, this is, both of these are, I was great at sales when I recorded both of these. But what I wasn't as experienced in was creating video content on this first one. And I was a little bit more thoughtful and critical about what I was putting out. And you can see it in my vibe, like I'm kind of trying to play it safe, okay? So before we get into these, I want you to look at the difference in levels of dominance, the vibe, the difference in levels of vibe there where one, I just know exactly what I'm talking about. It's like no bullshit. I've done this 1,000 times. I'm here to like lead you through this process. Listen up. The downward inflecting tonality and kind of the feeling like you're running downhill with how you speak in the second one. And then in the first one, the apprehensiveness and the vibe of like being safe. Okay. And also look how my eyebrows lifted. That's also a sign of uncertainty. Like you don't know what you're doing. Okay. So this is actually going to be vulnerable for you. And just give it to you here. Cause this is kind of embarrassing. And it's sad because even when I recorded this first one, like I know better than this. But it just goes to show, like, I was just kind of doing paid traffic for the very first time. I was very uncertain, and the uncertainty was the root cause of this kind of shitty energy and tonality, okay? So I'm actually going to have to pause this video and then change the audio because I'm walking through a headset. One sec.
Okay, so we're going to get into this now. What up, guys? Cole here, and if you're on this page, I should just book a consult with me and my team in the next few days. So in the meantime, I wanted to give you some concrete next steps so you know how to show up as prepared as possible to get as much value as possible out of our time together. So real quick, just add it. Okay, so we only need to even go through 15 seconds to see how bad this is. Now, look at like the level of apprehension. I'm almost like almost leaning away from the camera. My eyebrows are lifted. I'm kind of like overly critical about like overthinking what I'm saying a lot. I'm not fully like, am I talking even how I'm talking now to you guys? No. Like I'm almost just kind of like, I have that contained expression. It's not full range. It's a little bit apprehensive. It's not terrible in the sense of very, very monotone, bad cadence and, upward inflecting and just very uncertain, but it's definitely not good and it's not me. Okay. And it's because like I had never, and this is like a thank you page video for a paid traffic page. So it's like really not a big deal at all. But I was just in a place where it was like the first paid traffic video that I was created or paid traffic campaign that I was creating. And I was just overthinking stuff. okay, and was coming across in my tonality and my certainty. Now, compare and contrast this to this one. What's up, guys? Cole here, and if you're on this page, you just booked a free sales team audit with either me or my team, okay? So there's going to be a quick, 30, 60-second video here just to make sure you can show up as prepared as possible to get as much value as possible out of our call together. So first thing first, in the email, you're going to get Okay, so even look at my face. I mean, it's just not even a comparison. I look like I'm a fucking killer in this one, and then I look like I'm a total bitch in this one. Who do you want to buy from? People buy from they buy from a little bit of grit opposed to, whatever the hell this is, okay? So again, go through this real fast. What up, guys? Cole here, and if you're on this page, just terrible. What's up, guys? Cole here, and if you're on this page, you just booked a free... So you see how I'm rolling downhill with my tonality in this one? It's on, it's very downward inflecting. It's, hey, if you're on this page, listen up, I've told this, we've done this with 1,000 people. 1,000 people have been through this process. I know exactly what the next steps need to be so that you don't waste time, I don't waste time. Let's get into it, right? I'm not saying that explicitly, but that is my tonality and where I'm coming across, okay? And it's just so funny. You can even see it sales team in my motto with either me or in my face, how much I'm even leaning into the camera. And it's just, you can see it in the level of certainty. Okay, so hopefully, sometimes it's hard to put it into words, but I recorded this video, you can see 9/15/20, so it's not even that long ago, and I was replacing the old video, and I looked at the old video, and it was at the same time I was kind of trying to teach some of this tonality stuff to one of our sales reps, and I was like, dude, you gotta see this difference, because this is exactly what you're doing wrong on the calls. And I'll tell you this, guys, there's a lot of buzz about neutral-based language. Okay, trust-based language. I'm a total proponent of that stuff. Now, at the same time, using trust-based language, neutral-based language, doesn't mean you become a little bitch, all right? And that you have zero confidence ever, and you're like, okay, well, at this point, where do you want to go from here? You're not going to say that, guys. So there needs to be that level of directness and certainty, okay? And you can just see the difference. It's just not even a question. Just look. It's just two different animals here. So that is going to be it for the video portion of this training. What I'm going to do, I'm actually having my assistant splice them now so we remove any personal information. But there's 2 call reviews I recently did with 2 different sales teams where the sales reps both had basically the same problem. They both had very upward inflecting tonality, a locked in, very capped range of expression, and because of the tonality and how poor it was, for lack of a better word, there was just no way, no matter what they said, it was not likely to be accepted to be true by the prospect, okay? And that trust and that authority was never going to be built, And so that's why you can say the same words as somebody else is saying. You can use the same exact script and get 2 entirely different results. Because remember, going back up here, there's these 3 filters, and that's what our brain uses subconsciously, because we want to conserve as much energy as possible, how to accept what ideas to be true versus what ideas not to be true, okay? And it's all the way how you're communicating it and your subcommunication, not the words that you're saying. So, Cole Gordon, that is it for this training. I am out.